Maya Rodriguez had always believed that life was meant to be lived in front of a camera. At 23, she had built an empire on 15-second videos, transforming herself from a small-town girl from Phoenix into one of the most followed creators on TikTok. With over 12 million followers hanging on her every move, Maya had grown accustomed to a world where boundaries seemed to exist only for other people. The invitation to London had arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by her assistant Jenny along with her usual stack of collaboration requests and brand deals. This one was different, though. The elegant cream envelope bore the seal of a luxury travel company, offering her an all-expenses-paid trip to document London's most iconic landmarks. Maya's eyes had lit up immediately. Content featuring royal locations always performed exceptionally well, and she could already envision the engagement numbers climbing. Pack the good camera equipment, Maya had told Jenny without looking up from her phone, where she was already sketching out potential video concepts. And, make sure to bring the portable lighting setup. London's weather is unpredictable. The flight to London had been a whirlwind of first-class treatment and strategic social media posts. Maya documented every moment, from the champagne service to the view from her window seat. Her followers ate it up, filling the comments with heart-eye emojis and requests for travel tips. By the time the plane touched down at Heathrow, her arrival video had already garnered over 2 million views. Maya's first few days in London were a content creator's dream. She filmed herself exploring Camden Market, sipping tea in quaint cafes, and posing dramatically in front of Big Ben. Each video was carefully crafted to showcase not just the locations, but Maya herself as the aspirational lifestyle her followers craved. The views kept climbing, the brand partnerships kept flowing, and Maya felt invincible. It was Jenny who first suggested Buckingham Palace. The changing of the guard ceremony is iconic, she had said, consulting the itinerary on her tablet. Perfect for content, and it's free. We could get some amazing shots. Maya had nodded enthusiastically, already envisioning herself in the perfect outfit against the palace backdrop. She spent the evening before researching the ceremony, not for historical context, but for the best camera angles and optimal posting times. She chose a flowing red dress that would stand out beautifully against the grey London sky and practiced her most photogenic poses in the hotel mirror. The morning of the palace visit dawned crisp and clear. Maya woke before sunrise, spending 2 hours on hair and makeup before meeting Jenny in the hotel lobby. They took a black cab to the palace, Maya filming the journey and narrating her excitement for her followers. The driver, an older man with kind eyes, had chuckled at her enthusiasm. "First time seeing the guards, love?" he had asked, catching her eye in the rearview mirror. "Yes, but definitely not the last," Maya had replied with a confident smile, not knowing how prophetic those words would prove to be. As their taxi pulled up to the palace gates, Maya felt her pulse quicken with excitement. The imposing structure rose before them, its windows catching the early morning light. Tourists were already gathering in anticipation of the ceremony, many holding phones and cameras, but none with the professional setup that Jenny was expertly assembling. Maya positioned herself strategically near the front of the crowd, her red dress a stark contrast to the more subdued colors chosen by the other tourists. She began filming immediately, providing commentary about the palace's architecture and history, facts she had hastily memorized from a Wikipedia article the night before. "Hey beautiful souls," she began, using her signature greeting as she held her phone at the perfect angle. "Maya here, and I am literally standing in front of Buckingham Palace right now. I cannot even begin to express how surreal this feels. Like, I'm actually here, at the actual palace where the actual royal family lives." The comments began flowing immediately. Heart emojis, fire emojis, and messages of encouragement from her devoted followers who lived vicariously through her adventures. Maya thrived on this immediate feedback, each notification serving as validation that she was living the life everyone else wished they could have. As the ceremony time approached, the crowd grew larger and more animated. Maya continued filming, capturing not just herself but the atmosphere around her. She interviewed fellow tourists, asked Jenny to film her walking dramatically along the palace fence, and even convinced a group of schoolchildren to cheer in the background of one of her videos. Then, the music began. The sound of drums and brass instruments filled the air as the guards began their march. Maya's excitement reached fever pitch as she saw them approaching, tall, imposing figures in their iconic red uniforms and towering bearskin hats. Their faces were stoic, their movements precise and mechanical, as if they were part of an elaborate clockwork display. "Oh my God, you guys, they're coming," Maya whispered into her camera, her voice breathy with excitement. "This is it. This is actually happening." But, as Maya watched the guards approaching, something unexpected began to stir within her. It wasn't just excitement about the content opportunity anymore. There was something mesmerizing about their discipline, their commitment to tradition, their complete indifference to the crowd of tourists surrounding them. She found herself focusing on one guard in particular, a tall figure whose steady gaze seemed to look right through her and the chaos around them. Maya had always been drawn to challenges, to situations where her charm and confidence could win people over. Throughout her rise to social media fame, she had never encountered anyone who seemed completely immune to her presence. But, these guards were different. They existed in a world where her 12 million followers meant nothing, where her perfectly curated image held no power. As the ceremony continued, Maya found herself studying the guard she had noticed earlier. There was something almost otherworldly about his stillness, his complete dedication to duty despite the cameras flashing around him and the excited chatter of the crowd. She wondered what it would take to break through that professional exterior, to see the human being beneath the uniform. "They're so serious," she murmured to Jenny, not realizing she was still recording. "I wonder if they ever smile." Jenny nodded absently, focused on getting the best shots of the ceremony. But, Maya's mind was already racing ahead, formulating an idea that would soon change everything. She had built her career on doing the unexpected, on pushing boundaries that others wouldn't dare cross. Every viral video she had ever made had involved taking risks, whether it was sneaking into exclusive events or approaching celebrities in public spaces. As the ceremony concluded and the guards took their positions, Maya felt a familiar thrill. The kind of excitement that preceded her most successful content. She had found her next challenge, her next viral moment. The guard who had captured her attention was now standing at perfect attention near the palace entrance, his expression unchanged despite the dozens of tourists taking selfies nearby. Maya checked her appearance in her phone camera one more time, adjusting her hair and refreshing her lipstick. The red dress had been a perfect choice. It made her impossible to ignore against the palace's grey facade. She handed her phone to Jenny and whispered her plan. "Keep filming, no matter what happens," she instructed, her eyes never leaving the motionless guard. "This is going to be incredible content." Jenny looked uncertain, but she had learned not to question Maya's instincts when it came to creating viral moments. Over the years, she had watched Maya turn seemingly ordinary situations into internet gold through sheer force of personality and perfect timing. Maya took a deep breath and began walking toward the guard, her heels clicking against the pavement with each confident step. The tourists around her began to notice, some pulling out their own phones to capture whatever was about to happen. Maya was used to being watched, used to being the center of attention, but this felt different somehow. More intense. As she approached the guard, Maya could see him more clearly. He was younger than she had initially thought, probably close to her own age, with sharp features and an unwavering gaze that looked straight ahead. Up close, she could see the intricate details of his uniform, the precise way every button and belt was positioned. There was something almost artistic about his stillness, like a living statue created by a master sculptor. Maya positioned herself directly in front of him, close enough that he couldn't possibly ignore her presence. She flashed her most dazzling smile, the one that had launched 1,000 brand partnerships and charmed countless celebrities into collaborations. "Hi there," she said softly, her voice carrying just enough to be picked up by Jenny's camera. "You're doing an amazing job standing so still." The guard's expression didn't change. His eyes remained fixed on some distant point beyond Maya's head, as if she were completely invisible. Maya felt a flutter of uncertainty, quickly replaced by determination. She had never met a challenge she couldn't conquer. "I'm Maya," she continued, stepping slightly closer. "I'm here from America, and, I have to say, you're probably the most handsome guard I've seen all day." Still nothing. Not even a flicker of recognition that he had heard her. Maya could hear the excited murmur of the crowd around them, could sense phones being raised to capture this unusual interaction. This was exactly the kind of moment that could break the internet, but only if she could get some kind of reaction. Maya had built her career on reading people, on knowing exactly what to say or do to get the response she wanted. But, this guard was unlike anyone she had ever encountered. His commitment to his role was absolute, his professionalism unwavering despite her obvious attempts to distract him. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the distant sounds of London traffic and the excited whispers of the growing crowd. Maya realized that she was at a crossroads. She could walk away, accept that some people were simply immune to her charm, and content herself with the footage she already had. Or she could push further, do something so unexpected that it would be impossible to ignore. Maya had never been one to back down from a challenge. Throughout her life, from her early days posting videos in her childhood bedroom to her current status as a social media sensation, she had succeeded by being bolder than everyone else. By doing things that others were too afraid or too polite to attempt. The idea came to her suddenly, like a lightning bolt of inspiration. It was outrageous, it was risky, and it was exactly the kind of content that would have her followers talking for weeks. Before she could second-guess herself, Maya made her decision. She took another step closer to the guard, close enough now that she could see her own reflection in the polished buttons of his uniform. The crowd around them had gone completely silent, sensing that something significant was about to happen. Even Jenny seemed to be holding her breath behind the camera. Maya reached up slowly, her hand moving toward the guard's face with the confidence of someone who had never been rejected. In her mind, she was already imagining the video going viral, the millions of views and thousands of comments. This would be the content that cemented her status as the creator willing to do anything for the perfect moment. But, as her hand drew closer to the guard's cheek, something in his eyes shifted almost imperceptibly. For just a moment, Maya thought she saw something, surprise, perhaps, or maybe even concern. It was the first crack in his professional facade, the first sign that he was human beneath the uniform. That tiny moment of connection, that brief glimpse behind the mask, should have been enough. Maya had gotten her reaction, proven that she could affect even the most stoic professional. But, success had always made Maya hungry for more, and, in that crucial moment, she decided to push even further. Without another thought, Maya leaned in toward the guard, her lips pursed for a kiss that would either make her career or destroy it completely. The world seemed to slow down around her as she crossed that final boundary, moving from playful flirtation into something far more serious. She could hear Jenny's sharp intake of breath behind her, could sense the collective gasp from the crowd of tourists who had gathered to watch. But, Maya's focus was entirely on the guard in front of her, on the moment when her lips would meet his cheek and create the most talked-about piece of content in social media history. Time seemed suspended as Maya closed the final distance between them, her heart pounding with excitement and adrenaline. This was it, the moment that would change everything, the viral sensation that would elevate her from popular creator to international phenomenon. But, as Maya's lips were about to make contact, she felt strong hands on her shoulders, gently but firmly pulling her back. The spell was broken, reality came rushing back, and Maya found herself face to face with consequences she had never considered. The hands on Maya's shoulders belonged to another guard who had appeared seemingly from nowhere. His grip was firm but not painful, professional yet unmistakably authoritative. Maya stumbled backward, her cheeks flushing red as the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. The crowd around them had erupted into a mixture of gasps, nervous laughter, and the rapid clicking of camera shutters. "Miss, you need to step back immediately," the second guard said, his voice calm but carrying an undertone that suggested this was not a request. Maya looked around wildly, suddenly, aware that what had seemed like harmless fun moments before had escalated into something far more serious. Jenny lowered her camera slightly, her face pale as she realized they might have crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The tourists who had been eagerly watching the spectacle now seemed uncomfortable, as if they were witnessing something they shouldn't be seeing. Children were being pulled behind their parents, and several people were already walking away, shaking their heads in disapproval. Maya's mind raced as she tried to process what was happening. In all her years of creating content, pushing boundaries, and testing limits, she had never encountered a situation where her actions had immediate, real-world consequences. Her world existed in the digital realm, where everything could be edited, where mistakes could be deleted, and where controversy usually translated into increased engagement and higher profits. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean," Maya began, but her words trailed off as she caught sight of the original guard she had approached. For the first time since she had noticed him, his expression had changed. The stoic mask had slipped slightly, revealing something that looked like disappointment mixed with resignation. It was as if her actions had confirmed something he already knew about the world, something that saddened rather than angered him. The second guard was speaking into a small radio device attached to his shoulder, his words too quiet for Maya to hear but clearly official in nature. Maya felt a chill run down her spine as she realized that this wasn't going to end with a simple warning or a request to move along. She had crossed into territory where her fame and follower count held no power, where the rules she had spent years bending were about to bend back. "We're going to need you to come with us, miss," the guard said, returning his attention to Maya. His tone was polite but left no room for argument. "There are some questions we need to ask you." Maya looked around desperately, hoping to find support from the crowd or perhaps spot an exit strategy. But the faces surrounding her were no longer friendly or admiring. Some looked shocked, others disapproving, and a few seemed almost angry. Maya realized with growing horror that she had misjudged the situation completely. What she had seen as harmless content creation, others viewed as disrespectful behavior toward a revered institution. "Jenny," Maya whispered, reaching for her assistant's arm. "What do we do?" Jenny looked just as lost as Maya felt. In all the time she had worked for the influencer, she had grown accustomed to Maya's ability to charm her way out of any situation. Hotel managers who were initially stern about noise complaints would end up laughing and offering complimentary room service. Store owners who caught Maya filming without permission would inevitably ask for selfies and mention of their businesses in her posts. But this was different. These weren't people who could be won over with smile and charisma. "Miss Rodriguez," the guard said, and Maya's heart skipped a beat as she realized he knew her name. Of course he did. In the age of social media, everyone was recognizable to someone. Her distinctive look and massive following made her impossible to miss, especially when she was dressed to stand out as dramatically as she was today. As they were escorted away from the crowd, Maya caught a glimpse of her reflection in one of the palace's windows. The red dress that had seemed so perfect that morning now looked garish and attention-seeking. Her carefully applied makeup was slightly smudged from the encounter, and her expression showed a vulnerability that her followers had never seen before. The room they were taken to was small and sterile, with plain white walls and basic furniture that looked like it belonged in an office building rather than a palace. Maya had expected something grander, more in line with the royal setting, but the mundane environment somehow made the situation feel even more serious. The guard who had intervened introduced himself as Sergeant Williams, and he was joined by a woman in civilian clothes who identified herself as Sarah Thornton from the Royal Household Security Department. Maya had never heard of such a department, but the woman's crisp professionalism and obvious authority made it clear that this was not going to be a casual conversation. "Miss Rodriguez," Sarah began, consulting a tablet in her hands, "I understand you're visiting London as part of a social media collaboration." Can you tell us about the nature of your visit? Maya explained about the travel company partnership, the content creation goals, and her planned itinerary. As she spoke, she found herself defending decisions that had seemed perfectly reasonable just hours before. Why had she chosen such an attention-grabbing dress? Why had she approached the guard so aggressively? Why had she thought it was appropriate to attempt physical contact with someone who was clearly working? I make content for a living, Maya said, her voice smaller than usual. I'm always looking for ways to engage with my audience, to create moments that are memorable and shareable. I never meant to disrespect anyone or cause any problems. Sarah nodded thoughtfully, making notes on her tablet. Miss Rodriguez, do you understand the significance of the Royal Guard's role? The traditions and protocols that govern their behavior? Maya realized with embarrassment that she had never considered these questions. In her mind, the guards had been more like performers or living decorations than real people with serious responsibilities. She had reduced centuries of tradition and honor to a potential backdrop for her content, and the weight of that realization was crushing. I think I'm beginning to, Maya admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Sergeant Williams leaned forward slightly, his expression serious but not unkind. The guards you see here have trained for years to reach their positions. They represent not just the military, but the crown, the nation, and traditions that stretch back hundreds of years. When they're on duty, they're not individuals, they're symbols. Maya felt tears welling up in her eyes as the full impact of her actions began to hit her. She had spent so many years thinking of herself as the center of every situation, as the star of her own ongoing performance, that she had forgotten other people had their own important roles to play. What happens now? Jenny asked quietly from the corner where she had been sitting in stunned silence. Sarah exchanged a glance with Sergeant Williams before answering. That depends on several factors. Miss Rodriguez, are you planning to post the footage you captured today? Maya looked at Jenny, who still had the camera equipment with her. The memory cards contained everything from their arrival at the palace to the moment Maya had been pulled away from the guard. In the normal course of things, Maya would already be editing the footage, crafting it into multiple videos that would keep her audience engaged for days. I don't know, Maya said honestly. I hadn't thought that far ahead. Well, you need to think about it now, Sarah said firmly. The footage you have could be seen as encouraging others to engage in similar behavior. It could be used to mock or undermine the dignity of the Royal Guard. These are serious concerns. Maya had never considered that her content could have consequences beyond her own brand and business. She had always operated under the assumption that entertainment was harmless, that her videos existed in a bubble where the only stakes were engagement metrics and advertising revenue. I understand you have a significant following, Sergeant Williams added. With that kind of reach comes responsibility. Your actions today didn't just affect you, they affected the guard you approached, his colleagues, and the institution they represent. The conversation continued for what felt like hours, though Maya's phone had been confiscated so she couldn't check the time. They discussed the legal implications of her actions, the potential for charges related to harassment or disruption of official duties, and the broader impact of social media on public behavior. Maya found herself thinking about the guard she had approached, wondering what he was experiencing right now. Was he being questioned too? Was he in trouble because of her actions? The thought that her pursuit of content might have caused problems for someone else made her stomach churn with guilt. Can I ask, Maya said hesitantly, is the guard okay? The one I approached? Sarah's expression softened slightly. He's fine, Miss Rodriguez. He handled the situation exactly as he was trained to do. But, I think it's telling that you're asking about his welfare now, after the fact, rather than considering it beforehand. The criticism stung because it was accurate. Maya realized that in all her planning for the day, in all her excitement about creating content at such an iconic location, she had never once considered how her actions might affect the people she encountered. They had been props in her performance rather than real individuals with their own feelings and responsibilities. As the questioning continued, Maya began to understand that this wasn't just about her specific actions today. It was about a larger pattern of behavior that social media had normalized, the idea that public spaces and other people existed primarily as content opportunities, that boundaries could be crossed in pursuit of engagement, that traditional standards of behavior didn't apply if you had enough followers. "Miss Rodriguez," Sarah said finally, "we're not going to pursue charges at this time, but there will be conditions. First, any footage from today cannot be posted without explicit approval from our office. Second, you'll need to attend a cultural sensitivity briefing before you leave London. And, third, we'll need a written commitment that you understand the seriousness of what happened today and will not engage in similar behavior in the future." Maya nodded eagerly, grateful that the consequences weren't worse. But, as the meeting concluded and she was escorted out of the palace, she realized that something fundamental had shifted. The confidence that had carried her through years of social media success felt shaken. The world seemed less accommodating, less willing to bend to her will, than it had that morning. Walking back through the palace gates with Jenny, Maya noticed that tourists were still gathering for photos, still excited about their royal experience. But, everything looked different to her now. She saw the guards not as potential content, but as real people doing important work. She noticed the signs posted around the area, requesting respectful behavior, that she had completely ignored earlier. "Maya," Jenny said quietly as they reached the street, "what are we going to tell your followers? They'll be expecting content from today." Maya realized she had no answer. For the first time in her career, she had created a story she couldn't tell, captured footage she couldn't use, and learned lessons that couldn't be packaged into inspiring posts. The gap between her online persona and her real experience had never been wider, and she had no idea how to bridge it. As they climbed into a taxi back to their hotel, Maya stared out the window at London's bustling streets. Somewhere in this ancient city, a guard was returning to his duties, probably thinking about the disrespectful American tourist who had tried to kiss him for internet fame. Maya wondered if she would ever be able to make amends for her actions, or if this would forever be a moment of shame she would have to carry with her. The taxi driver caught her eye in the rearview mirror, the same kind man who had driven them that morning. His earlier enthusiasm had been replaced by concern as he took in her obviously distressed state. "Everything all right, love?" he asked gently. "Palace visit didn't go as planned?" Maya managed a weak smile. "You could say that," she replied, knowing that this was the most honest thing she had said all day. The hotel room felt smaller when Maya returned, as if the walls had somehow moved closer together during her absence. Jenny sat in the armchair by the window, still clutching the camera equipment, while Maya paced back and forth across the carpet. The silence between them was heavy with unspoken questions and concerns about what would happen next. Maya's phone had been returned to her, and she stared at it now as if it were a foreign object. Normally, by this time of day, she would have already posted multiple stories, shared behind-the-scenes content, and engaged with thousands of comments from her followers. The device that had once been an extension of her personality now felt like a weight in her hands. "They're probably wondering where I am," Maya said, breaking the silence. She opened Instagram and saw that her story views from the morning were climbing toward the 2 million mark. The comments on her last post were filled with excitement about her palace visit, with followers eagerly asking when she would share the footage. Jenny looked up from where she had been staring blankly out the window. "What are you going to tell them?" It was the question Maya had been avoiding since they left the palace. Her entire career was built on transparency with her audience, on sharing every detail of her life and adventures. Her followers didn't just watch her content, they lived vicariously through her experiences. They trusted her to take them along on her journey, to share both the highlights and the struggles. But, how could she explain what had happened without making herself look foolish or irresponsible? How could she share a story about crossing boundaries and facing consequences when her brand was built on pushing limits and breaking rules? Maya scrolled through the comments on her posts, reading message after message from followers who looked up to her, who saw her as an inspiration and role model. Many of them were young women who dreamed of having her lifestyle, her confidence, her apparent ability to make the world bend to her will. The thought of disappointing them was almost as crushing as the guilt she felt about her actions at the palace. Maybe I could just say the footage didn't turn out well, Maya suggested weakly. Or that there were technical problems with the equipment. Jenny shook her head. Maya, you've built your entire brand on authenticity. Your followers trust you because they believe you're real with them. If you start lying now, especially about something this big, they'll eventually find out. Maya knew Jenny was right. In the age of social media, secrets were nearly impossible to keep. Someone in that crowd had undoubtedly recorded the incident, and it was only a matter of time before footage surfaced online. Better to control her own narrative than let others define her story. But the thought of admitting her mistake publicly terrified her more than any consequence she had faced at the palace. Her online persona was built on confidence and success. She was the girl who could talk her way into any event, charm any celebrity, and turn every experience into golden content. Showing vulnerability or admitting failure didn't fit with the image she had spent years cultivating. Maya's phone buzzed with a message from her manager back in Los Angeles. David had been with her since her early days on the platform, helping her negotiate brand deals and navigate the business side of her career. His message was simple: haven't seen any palace content yet. Everything okay? Maya stared at the message for a long time before responding. Had some complications. We'll call you later. Within minutes, her phone was ringing. David's voice was sharp with concern when she answered. What kind of complications? He asked without preamble. The travel company is expecting content from today's visit. They've already started promoting your partnership on their channels. Maya felt another wave of guilt wash over her. It wasn't just her own reputation at stake, her actions had implications for the businesses and people who worked with her. The travel company had invested in her trip expecting professional content that would showcase London's attractions. Instead, they might end up associated with a scandal. I may have gotten a little too enthusiastic with the content creation, Maya admitted, trying to keep her voice steady. There was an incident with one of the royal guards. David was quiet for a moment, and Maya could practically hear him calculating the potential damage to her brand. How bad? He asked finally. Bad enough that I can't post any of the footage without approval from the royal household, Maya said, the words feeling strange and heavy on her tongue. The conversation that followed was one of the most difficult of Maya's career. David asked probing questions about exactly what had happened, what the legal implications might be, and how they could manage the situation to minimize damage to her brand. Throughout it all, Maya found herself defending actions she was no longer sure she could defend. The good news is that this kind of controversy can sometimes boost engagement, David said, ever the strategist. If we handle it right, frame it as a learning experience or a moment of personal growth, your audience might actually connect with you more. But, something about that approach felt wrong to Maya now. The idea of turning her mistake into a monetizable moment, of packaging her genuine regret and confusion into content that would generate views and revenue, made her stomach turn. She was beginning to understand that some experiences weren't meant to be shared, that some lessons were too personal to become public entertainment. That evening, Maya found herself walking the streets of London alone. She had left Jenny back at the hotel, needing space to think without the pressure of managing her image or planning her next move. The city felt different in the evening light, older, more serious, weighted with the kind of history that couldn't be captured in a 15-second video. She found herself standing outside Westminster Abbey, looking up at its Gothic towers and thinking about the centuries of tradition they represented. For the first time since she had started her career, Maya considered the difference between things that were old because they were meaningful and things that were old because they made good content. Her phone buzzed constantly with notifications, comments, messages, tagged posts from other creators in London. Maya's absence from social media was becoming noticeable, and her most devoted followers were starting to express concern. Several fan accounts had posted screenshots of her last story with worried captions asking if she was okay. Maya realized that in building her career on constant availability and transparency, she had created an expectation that every moment of her life would be shared and documented. The idea of privacy, of experiences that existed just for herself, had become foreign to her. She wondered when she had stopped living in moments and started living for them instead. Walking back toward her hotel, Maya passed a group of tourists taking selfies in front of a red phone booth. She watched them pose and repose, checking their phones between shots to see how the photos looked, adjusting their positions to find the most flattering angles. Just days ago, she would have seen kindred spirits. Now she wondered if they were experiencing the city at all or just documenting their presence in it. Back in her room, Maya sat on the bed with her laptop open to a blank document. She had decided to write something, not for posting, not for her audience, but for herself. A way of processing what had happened and what it meant for her life and career. As she typed, Maya found herself confronting uncomfortable truths about the person she had become. She had spent so many years crafting an online persona that she wasn't sure where Maya Rodriguez ended and her brand began. The confidence that had made her successful had crossed over into entitlement. The fearlessness that had created opportunities had become recklessness. Maya wrote about the guard she had approached, trying to imagine what the encounter had been like from his perspective. She pictured him getting ready for work that morning, putting on the uniform that represented so much history and responsibility, never imagining that he would have to deal with someone treating his profession as entertainment. She wrote about the tourists who had gathered to watch her attempt to kiss him, wondering what they had thought of her behavior. Had they been entertained or embarrassed? Had any of them gone home and told their families about the disrespectful American they had witnessed at the palace? Most difficult of all, Maya wrote about her followers, the millions of people who looked up to her and modeled their own behavior on what they saw in her content. How many young women had learned from watching her that boundaries were made to be crossed, that getting attention was more important than showing respect, that being famous meant being entitled to other people's time and space. As the hours passed, Maya's writing became more honest and more painful. She confronted the ways that social media had changed her perspective on human relationships, making her see other people as potential content rather than individuals deserving of respect. She acknowledged that her success had come at a cost she was only beginning to understand. The cultural sensitivity briefing was scheduled for the next morning, and Maya found herself actually looking forward to it. For the first time in years, she wanted to learn something that wouldn't immediately become content, to understand something that might make her a better person rather than a more successful creator. Jenny knocked on her door around midnight, bringing tea and checking to see how Maya was handling everything. They sat together in the dimly lit room, talking more honestly than they had in months about the pressures of social media success and the ways it had changed both of their lives. "I've been thinking," Jenny said carefully, "about whether this is sustainable. The constant pressure to create content, to top yourself with every post, to turn every experience into entertainment. Maybe this situation is a wake-up call." Maya nodded, grateful that Jenny was voicing thoughts she hadn't been brave enough to speak aloud. "I feel like I've forgotten how to exist without an audience," Maya admitted. "Even when I'm alone, I'm thinking about how I'll describe the experience later, how I'll package it for consumption." They talked through the night about possible changes Maya could make to her approach, taking regular breaks from posting, creating content with more substance and less shock value, using her platform to educate rather than just entertain. The conversation felt like the beginning of something important, though neither of them was sure exactly what that might be. As dawn broke over London, Maya realized that the most significant part of this experience wouldn't be captured in any video or post. The real story was happening in the quiet moments of reflection, in the uncomfortable conversations with herself about who she wanted to be, in the gradual understanding that growth sometimes required stepping away from the things that had made you successful. Her phone showed thousands of unread notifications, but, for the first time in her career, Maya didn't feel compelled to respond to them immediately. The world would continue turning whether or not she posted a story today, and perhaps her followers would benefit from learning that lesson too. Outside her window, London was waking up, commuters heading to work, shopkeepers opening their stores, guards beginning their shifts at various posts throughout the city. Life was continuing with or without her documentation of it, and Maya found that thought both humbling and, strangely comforting. The cultural sensitivity briefing took place in a small conference room at the royal household's administrative offices, far from the grandeur of the palace that tourists usually saw. Maya arrived early, having barely slept and, feeling a mixture of anxiety and curiosity about what she would learn. She had spent her career avoiding educational content that didn't serve her brand, but, now she found herself genuinely eager to understand the traditions she had so carelessly disrupted. Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell, the woman who conducted the briefing, was not what Maya had expected. Instead of the stern authority figure she had imagined, Dr. Hartwell was warm and professorial, with an obvious passion for British history and customs. She began the session by asking Maya what she knew about the Royal Guard, and Maya's embarrassingly limited knowledge became immediately apparent. "I think I've been living in a bubble," Maya admitted as Dr. Hartwell explained the centuries-old traditions, the rigorous training, and the deep sense of honor associated with the position. "I reduced something incredibly meaningful to a potential Instagram moment." Dr. Hartwell nodded sympathetically. "You're not alone in that, Miss Rodriguez. Social media has changed how many people interact with cultural institutions. The challenge is finding ways to appreciate and share these experiences without diminishing their significance." As the briefing continued, Maya learned about the personal sacrifices guards made, the months of training they endured, and the pride they took in representing their country. She discovered that the stoic expressions she had found intriguing were the result of intense mental discipline, not indifference to the world around them. "The guard you approached yesterday," Dr. Hartwell said gently, "is a decorated soldier who served in Afghanistan before being selected for this honor. His stillness during the ceremony represents not just tradition, but personal strength and professional dedication." Maya felt her cheeks burn with shame as she realized the depth of her misunderstanding. She had seen an interesting challenge where she should have seen a human being deserving of respect. The decorated soldier had become nothing more than a prop in her personal performance, and the weight of that realization was almost crushing. "Is there any way I could apologize to him?" Maya asked quietly. "Not for content, not for my audience, but because I genuinely feel terrible about how I behaved." Dr. Hartwell considered this request carefully. "That's not typically done, but I think it shows genuine remorse. Let me see what can be arranged." 3 hours later, Maya found herself back at the palace, but this time in a private office rather than among the crowds of tourists. The guard she had approached, Sergeant James Morrison, she learned, sat across from her in civilian clothes. Without his uniform and ceremonial hat, he looked younger and more approachable, but there was still a quiet dignity about him that made Maya feel even more ashamed of her actions. "Sergeant Morrison," Maya began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I wanted to apologize personally for yesterday. I was completely inappropriate, and I'm horrified by my own behavior." James studied her for a moment before speaking. "I appreciate you coming here," he said, his voice calm and measured. "Can I ask what you were thinking when you approached me?" The question was fair but painful. Maya forced herself to be honest. "I was thinking about content. About creating a moment that would go viral, that would get millions of views and hundreds of thousands of likes. I wasn't thinking about you as a person at all, and that's inexcusable." James nodded slowly. "That's what I assumed. It happens more often than you might think, people treating us like attractions rather than people doing a job." Maya felt even worse, realizing that her behavior was part of a pattern rather than an isolated incident. "How do you deal with it? How do you stay professional when people are treating you like an object?" "Training helps," James replied. "But, mostly, I try to remember why I'm there. The uniform represents something bigger than me, something worth preserving." When people disrespect the position, they're not really disrespecting me personally, they're disrespecting an institution that has served the country for centuries. Maya found herself thinking about her own relationship with the things she represented. Her platform gave her influence over millions of young people, but she had rarely considered the responsibility that came with that power. She had used her reach to sell products and promote brands, but had she ever used it to promote values or ideas that mattered? I have a following of over 12 million people, Maya said, surprising herself by bringing it up. Most of them are young women who look up to me and copy what I do. I'm realizing now that I haven't been setting a very good example. James seemed genuinely interested in this perspective. What kind of example do you think you have been setting? The question forced Maya to confront uncomfortable truths about her influence. That boundaries don't matter if you're confident enough to cross them. That other people exist to entertain you. That getting attention is more important than showing respect. She paused, feeling tears welling up in her eyes. I think I've been teaching young women to be entitled and disrespectful, and I hate that. The conversation continued for nearly an hour, ranging from topics of duty and service to the impact of social media on human behavior. James proved to be thoughtful and articulate, and Maya found herself genuinely enjoying their discussion in a way that had nothing to do with content creation or personal gain. Can I ask you something? Maya said as their meeting drew to a close. If you could say something to my followers, to young people who might be watching my content, what would it be? James considered carefully before responding. I'd tell them that the best way to honor something you admire is to understand it first. Whether it's a tradition, a person, or an institution, taking the time to learn about it shows more respect than any photo or video ever could. Maya knew immediately that this would be the foundation of her first post since the incident. Not a defensive explanation or a strategic apology, but a genuine reflection on respect, responsibility, and the importance of seeing other people as human beings rather than content opportunities. Back at her hotel that evening, Maya sat down to write what would become the most important post of her career. She started and deleted several drafts, struggling to find words that felt genuine rather than calculated for maximum engagement. Finally, she began with the simple truth: I made a serious mistake yesterday, and I need to talk to you about it. Maya wrote about approaching the guard, about her motivations, and about the consequences of her actions. She described the cultural sensitivity briefing, her conversation with James, and the things she had learned about respect and responsibility. Most importantly, she wrote about the questions the experience had raised about her own behavior and the example she was setting for her followers. I've realized that I've been treating the world like my personal content studio, she wrote. I've approached people, places, and traditions as if they existed for my entertainment rather than recognizing their inherent value and dignity. That's not the person I want to be, and it's not the behavior I want to model for anyone who looks up to me. Maya didn't post the message immediately. Instead, she called her parents in Phoenix, people who had known her long before social media fame had changed her perspective on the world. She read them the draft and asked for their honest feedback. It sounds like you, sweetheart, her mother said, her voice warm with pride and concern. Not the performer you've been playing online, but the thoughtful young woman we raised. Your followers deserve to see that person. Her father, never one for many words, simply said, it takes courage to admit when you're wrong. That's the kind of strength that lasts. Maya posted the message the next morning, along with a single photo, not of herself, but of the palace gates where everything had happened. She turned off comments for the first few hours, wanting people to read and reflect rather than immediately react. When she finally opened the comments, Maya was surprised by the response. Instead of the defensive anger or disappointed criticism she had expected, she found thousands of thoughtful replies from followers who appreciated her honesty. Many shared their own stories of times they had been disrespectful or inconsiderate, inspired by Maya's vulnerability to reflect on their own behavior. Some comments came from young women who said the post had made them reconsider how they approached social media and interactions with others. Others came from people who worked in service positions who thanked Maya for acknowledging the humanity of people who were often treated as background characters in other people's stories. Of course, there was criticism too. Some followers accused Maya of being dramatic or attention-seeking, suggesting that the whole incident was a publicity stunt. A few brands quietly ended their partnerships with her, concerned about the controversy. Maya found that these responses hurt less than she had expected. Losing followers and deals who were only interested in her as an entertainment product felt like shedding weight she hadn't realized she was carrying. The most meaningful response came from Jenny, who had been watching Maya's transformation over the past few days with growing hope. "This is the person I started working with," Jenny said after reading the post. "Before the algorithms and the metrics and the constant pressure to perform. I missed this version of you." Maya realized that she had missed this version of herself too. The woman who cared more about growth and engagement, who valued genuine connections over viral moments, who understood that influence came with responsibility rather than just privilege. The travel company that had sponsored her London trip reached out after seeing her post. Instead of expressing anger about the cancelled content, they asked if she would be interested in creating a different kind of collaboration, one focused on responsible tourism and cultural education rather than viral entertainment. "We think your experience could help other travelers understand the importance of approaching new places with respect and curiosity," their representative explained. "Your honesty about your mistake makes you the perfect person to model better behavior." Maya accepted the offer, but with new parameters for her content creation. She would take time to research and understand the places she visited. She would seek out local voices and perspectives rather than making herself the center of every story. Most importantly, she would remember that her job was to serve her audience's growth and understanding, not just their appetite for entertainment. The guard James Morrison, whom Maya now thought of as a friend rather than a missed content opportunity, had given her his perspective on duty and service. Maya began to understand her platform in similar terms. She had been given a remarkable reach and influence, and with it came the duty to use that power responsibly. 6 months later, Maya's content looked completely different. She still traveled and shared experiences with her followers, but her videos focused on history, culture, and human connection rather than shock value and viral moments. Her engagement rates had initially dropped, but they slowly climbed back up as her audience evolved with her. More importantly, Maya felt proud of her work in a way she hadn't experienced in years. Instead of constantly chasing the next viral moment, she was building something sustainable and meaningful. The young women who followed her were learning about the world and themselves, not just watching someone else live an enviable life. Maya kept a photo from her London trip on her desk, not one of herself, but a shot Jenny had taken of tourists respectfully maintaining distance from the guards during a ceremony. It reminded her daily that the world was full of meaningful experiences that didn't need to be captured, consumed, or performed for others. Some moments were most valuable when they remained private, when they existed purely for the growth and understanding they provided to the person experiencing them. The real story of her encounter with the Royal Guard wasn't the dramatic moment of attempted contact or the consequences that followed. It was the quiet transformation that happened afterward, when Maya chose to see her mistake not as content to be monetized but as a chance to become a better person and a more responsible creator. That story would never go viral, but it was the most important one she had ever lived.